saw quite, I think, part of the monumental part of this conference, which was going to be the election of the leadership. And it seems that there's been an entire shake-up when you take a look at those top 6 members then of the EFF, all but 2 positions remaining the same, that of the president and the deputy president. Elections getting underway well into the evening, although there may have been some surprises as far as that top 4, the remaining 4 positions are concerned. It doesn't seem that there were any difficulties in as far as process was concerned. The man who's, of course, at the steering wheel of all that is Terry Tselane. He joins me now. We're also joined by our political editor, Busiso Ngala. Terry, let me begin with you. Nominations and election processes are usually the ones that tend to create a bit of difficulties, but I think how the process ran last night was pretty smooth.
Absolutely. We had done our homework. We understood the constitution and all the other provisions, and it was much more easier to translate that into action. And it was amazing that for the first time in the history of South Africa, you could actually have the elections for 16,300 people, 300 votes counted and declared within just under 1.5 hours. It was just amazing. I was very proud of my team.
Does it help to not have had the level of contestation, perhaps, that one would have anticipated, because those positions were pretty clear-cut?
Well, with us, we had prepared for any eventuality. When we go into an election of this nature, we will prepare for election as though there are going to be actual votes for each and every position. And we are quite happy. We did a fantastic job, and in all other things, it was in line with the provisions of the EFF Constitution and all other guidelines.
Well, I guess, Sbu, when you look at then who makes up this new top 6 of the EFF, everything that Julius Malema has been saying has in many ways materialized. And I think one of the things he said when delivering his political report yesterday as a challenge to those who are going to not be re-elected, he said this is the true test of their loyalty to the party, whether or not they've been serving the party or they've been serving the positions that they've been given.
Obviously, Julius Malema got what he wanted. This is the top 6 he wanted. These are the people he wanted. He's set his sights on 2021. And I think that for the other members who are not elected, your Dalimbofus, your Godred Gadis, Leanne Mateis, we will see what happens with the nominations for the CCT. I think the similar pattern will follow with the CCT, in that Julius Malema will get the central command team that he wants. And if Mr. Mbofu, Gadi or Mateis end up in that CCT, that will at least give us an indication that relations have been broken down between them and Julius Malema. But I think that he wants Marshal Dlamini to take the party forward. But I think another point that needs to be made is the fact that the position of Secretary General is very crucial. It remains to be seen whether they'll retain Marshal in Parliament, as they did with Gadi.
All right. Let's talk about then the elections that's set to take place today. This morning, we're supposed to have the announcement of last night's results. Is that still going ahead? I know that you have quite an, you have the inside info as far as that part of the program is concerned. And then also, if you can talk to us about the nominations and the elections of the Central Command team, as Busiso was talking about.
Yeah, you remember that in terms of the program, we were supposed to do the declaration of the results this morning. But I realized at the time when I was about to hand over the process to the leadership of the EFF, that I had actually left a lacuna. And that's why I had to declare the results there and there in order for the new leadership to be able to take over. Otherwise, it was going to be quite a challenge in terms of how you take the process forward. So I had to think very, very quickly to say, under the circumstances, I can't now call the former chairperson to come and take the process forward when there was a new leadership that essentially was already elected. So there is not going to be any new declaration of the results. What the team has already done is to basically prepare the result slips, and then we'll just send them over to the leadership as part of our handover processes. So this morning what will happen, we'll go through the same process that we went through yesterday for the 35 CCT members. So the Constitution, as you may be aware, it requires that every person must actually have a threshold of 30%. which translates to around 949, I think. So we'll go through that process again, and for each and every position, checking whether the people being nominated accept the nominations.
Are you expecting any difficulty with that? Because you're talking about 35 members. While they are an important part of the organization, certainly that 900 threshold may be quite high. So what happens when somebody does not reach the 30% threshold, and yet the 35 spots have not been completely filled?
We're going to keep on going like that until such time that those slots have been filled. We have an obligation as an election management body to make sure that the 35 positions are filled, and they're filled in line with the Constitution. So the first aspect is the 30% threshold, and the second one is that we must have 50% representation of women. So we will manage the processes that we comply with the obligation of the Constitution.
I wonder, when it comes to women representation, of course, they've now managed to scale it down, at least in the top 6, to the 50-50 mark. How do you see that translating, especially in that central command team? I mean, the likes of Mandisa Mashego last night being nominated for Secretary General, and of course, that particular nomination not necessarily holding. What does the future look like for people like Mandisa Mashego in the EFF?
Well, I think while Mandisa might not have made it as the Secretary General, I think in terms of the top 6, you still have 50-50 representation of women. And I think also going to the Central Command team, the same pattern will follow. I know Ndade Tselane administers elections, but if you follow conferences, you will know that there's probably already a slate or a slip that has all the 35 names, but still, they'll still have to follow that process. I think Julius and his leadership, they are aware that the EFF is not popular, particularly among women. Godrich Gadi made that in his report, where he talks about the split. Obviously, I think they'll have to do more. Just beyond, I think also the politics of the EFF and also the public character of the EFF will also have to change if they are to attract women. I'm not sure. Of course, it's a step in the right direction, and it's quite progressive to have 50-50 representation of women in all the structures.
Does it become important, the kind of roles that a Dalimpofu, a Godrich Gadi now play in the organization, or the kind of space that they're given within the EFF, despite the fact that they're no longer part of that top 6?
I think it will talk to their relationship with Julius. I mean, in the past, we know that from the last National Conference of the EFF, all those who were not elected who had opposed Julius Malema were actually hounded out of the party, despite him saying that he actually wants everyone to remain within the fold. And I think depending on how he treats them going forward, that will determine the kind of a role that they will play in the party. Because you must say, Dalimpofu was good for the EFF in terms of its image, and I think the EFF was also good for him, also for his social capital as well. I think Gadi as well, he has actually done very well and has made a profile for himself, but the EFF gave him that.
Sure. Ndade Tselane, as far as then the rest of today is concerned, when exactly do you wrap up your role in this conference and the election that we're expecting later?
As soon as the last member of the CCT has been elected, then we will be done with our responsibilities. Like I said earlier, we've got an obligation to make sure that all the 35 members are elected. Whether there's going to be actual voting or not depends on how the process is going to be unfolding today. But the team and I are ready to proceed with any eventuality.
You're a new organization. You've been in this space for a long time, but certainly independently a much shorter space of time. Given how efficiently, at least, you've run the process so far, are you hoping that other political parties are looking on and perhaps will give you a try the next time that they have to go around the election merry-go-round?
I think all the political parties realize that this is a new ball game, that IMSA as an organization has actually done what no other body has done in the history of this country. And then clearly they will want to use the services of this organization, and we are ready and willing to help any organization to deal with their democratic processes.
Certainly a democratic process, but I know many political analysts will also talk about the extent to which it is a predetermined process. But of course, when you have auditors and independent bodies who are running these elections and are saying, as far as we know, it has been credible, it's hard to then come back and say, well, this is still all very orchestrated.
Well, the verification process still has to take place. It's not to say that there will not be. I think it still needs to pass that muster, whether it is credible enough, and that is why IMSA is here. But as I said, the nature of congresses and conferences are such that and the nominations will still happen. People will be nominated. They will have to meet the 30% threshold muster and either make it or not make it to that top 35.
All right, well, certainly still sounds like it's going to be a long morning yet. 35 members of the Central Command team still need to be elected into their various positions. And of course, we'll be watching then to see the numbers that they need to meet the threshold is pretty much the same as those of the top 6. Now, of course, many of those positions in the top 6 going uncontested. So it'll be interesting to see how this situation or this voting process plays itself out for the remaining 35 spots of that crucial Central Command team. For now,